Hey guys, it's Charles Jaeger with PremiumBeat.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to get the most out of LUTs using Lumetri Color and Premiere Pro. Alright guys, before we get started, I do want to mention that you can download the project file for this tutorial, and in that I've included 3 LUTs that I created that you can then use to follow along with this tutorial. Now a lot of you may already be familiar with LUTs, also known as color lookup tables. And these work very similarly to color presets or correction presets, depending on which LUTs you're using. Now right now I'm inside of Premiere Pro and I'm working in a custom workspace, which is very similar to the editing workspace up here. But we're gonna go over here to the color workspace. I wanna show you what this does when we switch to this. So I'm just gonna click on that and it's gonna shift around all of the workspace. And you're gonna see we have the Lumetri Color panel over here on the right-hand side. And you can click on each of these and get different options. This is a really powerful tool when you're working with lookup tables in Premiere Pro. It's just gonna make things a lot more convenient for us. And this is also automatically gonna apply the Lumetri Color effect to any clips that we're above. So if I'm above this first clip or one of these other clips here, if I make any changes here in the Lumetri Color panel, it's automatically gonna apply that effect directly to that clip. So you don't have to worry about applying this effect from the effects panel, it's automatically gonna do that for you. Let's jump back here to the beginning of the timeline here. I've got a clip, and we're gonna first talk about correction LUTs. And these are lookup tables that typically convert your footage, usually from a log mode to a more standard profile, or what's known as Rec 709. So you can see this footage was filmed in Vlog with the GH5. And you can see it looks a little bit faded, very low contrast, low color saturation, and that's to get the most dynamic range from this camera. This was also filmed in 10-bit color, which really takes advantage of that Vlog profile. Now, if I just wanted to correct this footage, it would make it a lot easier for grading, just bringing it back to that standard profile. What I would do is I would use the basic correction right here in Lumetri Color. So I'm gonna click on this, and you're gonna see we have the option to input a LUT. But one thing you'll notice with this, if we select a LUT using this, we don't have any option for intensity or opacity or anything like that with this LUT. And that's why you only wanna apply correction LUTs under the basic correction section. If you have a lookup table that's for a more customized look or a grading look, make sure you apply that in the creative tab here, you'll see, because then we have an option for intensity. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more a little bit later. But let's just go back to a basic correction here and let me show you a correction style LUT. So I've got the Panasonic Vlog to Rec 709 LUT I'm going to use to just go ahead and correct this footage. So I'm going to come here to the input LUT and I'm going to select browse. And that's going to allow me to select that lookup table. So here it is right here, Vlog to 709, and I'll just go ahead and click open. And now we can see how that changed the look of our footage. It really just brought it to a more natural, workable color space, and now we can go ahead and apply our grade on top of this footage. So I can come back over here to basic correction, I can check on and off this, and you can see the difference there. But again, for basic correction, only use correction style lookup tables. I can go ahead and demonstrate this one more time on another shot I've got here with me on camera, and you can see, again, this is very washed out, very faded. This is very typical of log style footage, again, to try to get the most dynamic range. So I'll just go back to input LUT under basic correction, go to browse, and I'm going to select that correction LUT, Vlog to 709, and now we can see more contrast and color has been added. Now depending on your settings will depend really on how much color and contrast you have on the camera and your lighting and other variables there, but you can see this has corrected this so we can work with it much easier. Let's move on to the next shot I've got here, which is the exact same scene, but this was filmed in more of a Rec 709 or standard picture profile. And we're gonna apply a creative or grading style LUT onto this footage. So let's come over here to the creative tab. Again, when we use one of these type of LUTs, we wanna apply this in creative because again, we have this intensity slider we can adjust, which is really powerful here for when you're crafting your look. So I'm gonna come here to look and I'm gonna go to browse and I'm gonna select the M31 lookup table and go ahead and select open. Now this is a very common lookup table. A lot of people use this to get that teal orange look on their footage. And you'll notice this footage, it does have the teal orange look to it, but it definitely is leaning much more to the orange side. And that's really what we're gonna kind of focus on in this tutorial. I really want to show you guys how you can get the most out of your lookup tables, specifically the creative lookup tables, and a few variables you can adjust in Lumetri Color to get a lot more out of them. And so again, this is a very typical result I might get using the M31 lookup table on my footage. I'm gonna go ahead and check this off. And you'll notice that this footage is a little bit warmer in tone, and that's kind of a tendency of mine. I usually shoot a little bit warmer just because it makes skin tones look a little bit better, a little more lifelike. I often find that when shots are a little too cool, or maybe if they're perfectly white balanced, they almost look too sterile. So again, I kind of side on the warm side of things, which may be okay if I'm not going to apply a lookup table to my footage. But when I do apply a lookup table like this one, I'll go ahead and turn it back on. You can see it kind of makes the whole tone of the image a little too warm. It's not really on that teal orange balance that I'm looking for. And again, this is very common real world occurrence. A lot of times when you're out shooting, you may not have a perfect white balance on your shot. So what we can do here, once we've selected this lookup table, again, we have this intensity we can adjust. You can see here, and so you can see the results we get. In the past, what I would do is I would apply the lookup table to an adjustment layer and then just adjust the opacity of that. But again, we don't have to do that now with the Lumetri color effect. We can just adjust the intensity, and this works very similar to the opacity. So I'm just gonna set this back to 100. But the options that are really gonna help us the most is if we jump back actually to the basic correction. This is one thing that a lot of people may not do. They may have a tendency to just run down this list, but we can actually go back to basic correction now. When I click on this, let's go ahead and check down the white balance and the tone. And we can still make adjustments here that will basically be done to our footage before that LUT's applied. And one of the most crucial ones, in my opinion, again, is the white balance. So again, our shot here looks okay, but it's a little too warm. So watch what happens when I move the temperature a little bit over to the blue side, just balancing this back out. You can see we now get a much more natural looking image, and it looks a lot more like that teal orange aesthetic that I'm probably gonna be going for. So we come back over to creative and I check this on and off. You can now see we're really getting those orange tones and kind of those blue tones as well. And then you can adjust this really depending on the look you want. You can see as I bring this over, I'm still getting orange in the skin tones. If I bring it over too far though, it's actually gonna add too much blue to them and we're gonna kind of lose that teal orange aesthetic. And likewise, if I go all the way back up here, really gonna get like an orange gel effect. So I'm just gonna pull this back down, maybe around -32 or so. I think looks pretty good. And again, in the real world, you'll see a lot of examples like this. You might see an example of a lookup table on a website for something you're purchasing, and then you apply it to your footage and it doesn't look really anything like what you saw before. And a lot of times the case is your footage may not be properly white balanced or even exposed correctly. You can see I can adjust the exposure here and get different looks. As I bring this up, it kind of brightens those oranges and brightens up the overall kind of warmer color tones again. Whereas if I bring this down, it's gonna start to cool things off. This shot's pretty well exposed. I might bump it up just a little bit there. You might also want to adjust the shadows as well, but all these corrections are being applied before that creative lookup table is being applied on our footage. Another thing to take note of on lookup tables, if you're purchasing them or if you're using some that you've seen before, you might look at the scenes that they show examples for that lookup table on. Like if they're outside, then typically those are probably more geared to be used on outside footage, and then other interiors, maybe dark interiors. Usually they're demonstrating those lookup tables on those scenes for a reason, and they're probably more geared to those because they may react differently to green color tones, and in our case here, orange and teal color tones. Now again, the main settings I definitely recommend tweaking or just adjusting to see if you can get variance in your looks is going to be temperature, tint, and exposure. But two other backup kind of color settings you may want to tweak. If we come back over here to creative, we have options here for vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is going to tend to lean more toward greens and blues. It's typically better for exterior type shots. You can see as I go ahead and increase this, it's really going to bring out the blues more of the image when I increase this. And then the saturation, if your image just looks a little bit faded or lower color tone, you might bump that up just a little bit as well, because sometimes lookup tables will tend to bring that down, again, depending on whatever profile they created that lookup table with. Typically more retro looking or filmic profiles will have kind of a lower saturation point, and if you want to bring those back up into more of a modern look, you might want to bump up both of the vibrance and or the saturation. We can see another example of this on this next shot that I have here. You can see this is just a general exterior. And although this shot looks pretty well white balanced, it actually is, again, leaning a little bit more on the warmer side. Again, that's something I just do typically. And let's go over here to the creative options here, and I'm gonna go to the look. And let's go ahead and add in the M31 lookup table one more time. Now let's go ahead and select it and hit open. And now you can see we kind of have a teal orange aesthetic here. You can see a little bit of teal kind of on these trees. And the leaves are really popping with that orange. And so this shot looks like it's relatively correct. But if we just go back over to basic correction here and I come over to temperature and I bring this down a little bit, you're going to see how much blue is going to be added to the trees in the background, but the leaves are still going to stay relatively orange. And that's because they really had a high orange saturation. I can probably even bring this down a little bit more. And you can see I can adjust the exposure here some as well. As I increase this, you see it kind of washes out that blue. So I'm just going to leave this as it was on the default. I might actually come down here and increase the saturation a little bit, and go back to creative and increase the vibrance a touch. Now you can see we really kind of have a hyper teal orange look on this footage now. Now let's go back to the previous shot. Let's say that I had numerous shots like this was an interview with multiple people and I'm doing them all at the same location, and I really like the grade I've got on this. Even though I am using a lookup table here, the M31, I went ahead and tweaked, some of these other settings. And let's say maybe I don't want to have to copy the symmetry color effect every time and apply it to all these other clips. Or if I have someone else working on a remote site and I want to send them this color profile for them to use, there's a way we can do that as well with all of these settings that we've changed. So all we need to do here is I'm just going to come up here to telemetry color, and I think you can only do this from the color panel here. And you'll see these three lines. I'm going to click that. And you're going to see we have the option to export a .look or a .cube, and really this is a way for us to export our own lookup table based on the lookup table we've already have imported and the other settings we've adjusted with telemetry color. Now you can also create your own custom lookup tables this way if you don't want to import a LUT. You just want to go ahead and create your own custom settings. You can do that. You can export it. So I'm just going to select export cube. The .cube format is probably the most common lookup table format, and it's pretty universal. You can use it all across all types of different softwares, and it's definitely the one I use the most. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to call this interview LUT. And if I go ahead and select save, that's going to go ahead and export that LUT back out. And that's going to allow you to quickly export your own custom lookup tables. And I'm actually going to come over here to telemetry color effect, and let's go ahead and just see this in practice. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this effect. And I'm going to come down here to creative. And again, our shot, everything has been reset. We can go under the basic correction here. We can see everything's reset here. And also under the creative. And let's just go ahead and import back in that lookup table. And I'm going to select my interview lookup table and click open. And now we can see that shot has been completely brought back to life, and we didn't have to tweak any of the other settings. You can see under basic correction, none of these have been changed. And again, it's basing it off of the lookup table we already exported. Alright guys, hopefully you picked up a few tips if you are going to be working with lookup tables in telemetry color in Premiere Pro. And don't forget to download the project file for this tutorial, which has 3 lookup tables that I created. And you can see a few examples of those here applied to various footage. And don't forget, you guys can always check out more tutorials just like this one on the PremiumBeat blog. This has been Charles Yeager for PremiumBeat. Thanks for watching.